Every little thing you think that you need. Every little thing you think that you need. Every little thing that's just feeding your greed. Oh, I bet that you'd be fine without it.
You're listening to the Minimalist Podcast with Joshua Fields Milburn and TK Coleman.
Thank you, Malabama. Hello, everybody. Coming up on this free public minimal episode, a caller has a question about the chaos in her life that is caused by other people. And then we've got a lightning round question about the different ways that you make your own life more chaotic. That's followed by our Right Here, Right Now segment and an outstanding, a truly outstanding listener tip for you. You can check out the full Maximal edition of episode 449. That's the full episode where we answer 5 times the questions and we dive deep into several simple living segments. That private podcast episode is out right now at patreon.com/theminimalists. Your support keeps our podcast 100% advertisement free because, say it with me, y'all, advertisements suck. Let's start with our callers. If you have a question or a comment for our show, we'd love to hear from you. Give us a call. Our phone number is 406-219-7839 or email a voice recording right from your phone to podcast@theminimalists.com. Our first question today is from Marta.
Hi all, I'm Marta, Patreon subscriber from Portugal but living in the UK. I've been raising my sister for many years. I was very young when she moved in with me. She was only 12. She was also very young. My parents are lovely human beings and lovely parents, but their marriage can be very toxic for us as kids. So my finances were always towards making sure I could provide my sister with the best. And recently she turned 18, which is the legal age here, and she decided she wanted to go to Portugal, live with some friends. Although she didn't have any plan or strategy, we couldn't do anything to stop her from going. After some days, I realized that she was using my card, my debit card, and making purchases online on different apps. So when I spoke to her, she didn't apologize, and she didn't seem to understand the impact that has on my finances. Now, my mental health throughout the years I was raising her was in a really bad shape because my sister has borderline and she went through major crisis. Now I feel that my finances were also impacted. So I feel sad, I feel disappointed, but more than anything else, I'm feeling hopeless. I love her so much that I want to be here for her. I want to support her. But I'm so afraid that I lose myself in between. Some people around me just tell me that I need to let her go. Not as in not speaking to her anymore, but stop trying to save her. And I'm having such a hard time doing it. Thank you, and thank you for the community you built around you.
Marta, my heart certainly goes out to you. I know what it's like to deal with people who are stealing from us, right? Because that's what's happening. You didn't use those words. We often soften our language around things like that. She's using my debit card. She's using my funds. She's stealing from you. And it's okay to call that out. Now, TK, when I hear this question, I hear the heartache, but I also hear a question sort of behind the question. And that question is, how do I handle the chaos in my life that was caused by other people? Not just her sister. She mentioned toxic parents in there as well. What answer do you have for that question?
You have to give yourself permission to introduce the order that you already know how to introduce. When other people create chaos in our lives, it's especially when it's family and friends, it's not just their ability to create chaos. Oftentimes, that ability to create chaos is nurtured and sustained by our own hesitancy to establish the boundaries that we know will bring order and structure. But because we feel sorry for them, we feel pity for them, we feel guilty about not taking care of them, we don't treat them in the way that we would someone else. I am sure, Marta, I am sure that if this were a complete stranger or if this were just a coworker, you would have already nipped this in the bud because you don't have an information problem. You know exactly how to handle these types of people. You don't let people steal from you. Like, you're not that kind of person, and I can hear it. But what makes this difficult is there's that sense of, yeah, but she's my little sister and she needs me. And I've been looking out for her for so long, and she's my own flesh and blood. And sometimes that can make it more difficult for us to see the truth when it comes to the people that we love. So that's the starting point. Got to give yourself permission to see the truth when it comes to the people that you love, and to speak it and to stand on it.
And she's also wondering, should I let her go? Not as in stop communicating with her, but should I stop trying to save her? Or the way I look at that is, should I stop trying to change her? We often try to save other people, but if you want to save a fish from drowning, you just do nothing. Because otherwise, you could pull them out of the water. You're going to have the opposite effect. You might be able to pull your sister temporarily out of her situation or out of her suffering. But if she's not looking for that, well, you're going to cause a whole chain reaction of other chaos. And I think quite often we go searching for chaos in our own lives. I'm reminded of chaos theory, which basically describes the qualities of the point at which stability moves into instability, or order turns into disorder, or we could call it chaos here, right? And so at some point you felt like taking care of your sister, you were creating order in her life, but there was some sort of tipping point, whether it was her moving to Portugal, maybe it was even before that. You may not even be able to identify what that tipping point was. But then what happens is we often heap more chaos on top of the chaos. We often grab a shovel to dig ourselves out of the hole. And of course, we know what happens. The hole widens, it gets deeper. I've been thinking a lot about this recently, TK, because I have 4 friends who within the last year, and some of them are still going through it, have gone through some real chaotic events. I have one friend who went through a divorce. I have another friend who went through infidelity, and they have kids together. I have another friend who dealt with a death of a parent recently. And then I have someone else who lost their job unexpectedly. And these 4 different chaotic events. And it's interesting to see how people react differently to different types of chaos. I found that many of us, we heap more chaos onto it because it adds a sense of certainty or comfort, because I feel like I can't do nothing. It'd be irresponsible for me to do nothing. So now I'm going to go out and find other bits of chaos to heap onto that. Do you think that's part of the human condition?
Oh, it absolutely is, right? It reminds me of the Bobby McFerrin song where he says, in every life we have some trouble, but when you worry, you make it double. Don't worry, right? We have a tendency to double our problems. There's the problem, but then there's all the resistance we create around it through the stories that we tell, through the unhealthy patterns of reacting and responding to those problems. And this is one of them. I mean, one example even in this is the little sister refusing to apologize and just not seeing the seriousness of it. Now, that is a problem, but that's something that's outside your locus of control. There's nothing you can do to make a person who refuses to apologize. But what you can do is you can focus on what you can control, which is, it's my job to speak the truth. It's my job to let them know, for the record, that is not right. You should apologize, but even if you don't, I'm standing firm on the fact that what you did was wrong, and I hope for your good as well as mine, you come around to accepting that and taking responsibility for it. But either way, here is a boundary that I didn't uphold with you in the past, but I must uphold it from now on. You cannot receive this degree or kind of financial support from me. You cannot have the access to my cards that you once had the trust of possessing. That's like, you've lost that. And it takes a long time to earn something like that back. And that's an example of how you can solve a problem by saying, wait a minute, let's identify the things I can't control. And I don't have to pretend like those things are unimportant, but I just have to be honest with myself about the fact that I can't control them. And then I can put my attention on what I can control. And what we often find is, even though the stuff that we can't control is bad, it doesn't have as much power to bother us if we're really nailing it on the stuff that we can control. And so it's so important to really focus on that. And, when you have a situation like this where, man, it's just like Someone's disappointing you, you're doing them wrong, they're doing you wrong, and you want to save them. You also got to ask yourself, what am I saving them from? I think of saving someone as intervening when they are in real danger and doing something to help protect them from harm.
And they're also incapable of doing that on their own, either because they don't have enough information, they don't have enough ability. But there's there's this moment of, oh, that person's not able to save themselves, and so therefore I'm going to intervene.
Right. But what we often do when we speak of saving the ones we love, we speak of rescuing them from the discomfort of inconvenience. Oh, I don't want that person to experience the suffering of wanting something really badly and not getting it. Oh, I don't want that person to experience the suffering of their own choices producing undesirable effects in their lives. Because you don't want to save people from truth. You don't want to save people from the possibility of growing up. You don't want to save people from values like responsibility and integrity. And if you intervene every time someone you love that you're looking out for feels uncomfortable, what will happen is you will save them from the lessons they need in order to become mature. One of the reasons why she's not apologizing about stealing is because she hasn't learned how serious it is to be held accountable for stuff like that. And you're probably doing that in a really nice way for her. If she did that for a job, she's immediately terminated. And she might be blacklisted such that she wouldn't be able to find a job again without going way outside of that vicinity, right? Because people know people and people talk to people. And so the way you're handling things is probably as nice as she's going to get it, right? But when you do that kind of stuff in the real world, man, without family, like, it comes down on you hard. And so teaching her to think about cause and effect, teaching her to take responsibility for her actions, and telling her the truth with courage is one of the best things you can do to save her future relationships, because the rest of the world isn't going to be merciful towards her in the way that you are.
Do you think there's an element of entitlement here as well? The reason I ask is I had an employee that stole from me once, and it went unnoticed for a while because it was really small indiscretions and it almost looked like little errors. And then the person got more and more blatant in their theft. And at some point, it just was obvious, right? And when I sat that person down to talk to them, there was like this air of entitlement, like, oh, well, I did this because you didn't do this, as opposed to actually coming to me and talking about that. And it seems to me that that might be where Marta is with her sister. Her sister feels this sense of entitlement. I should be able to have access to your money, or I should be able to have access to your time or your energy or your kindness or your love. But maybe there's also this sentiment of letting go is the way to love someone. Of course, you're going to have to let go of the idealized version, this idealized picture you have of your sister right now. That version of your sister no longer exists. What exists now is someone who's related to you by blood, someone that you care about, someone you've taken care of for a long time, someone you have an attachment to. That person exists, but they exist with a new truth. And that truth is they've also been stealing from you. They've been mistreating you. They've been disrespecting you. Yeah. And maybe even there is a sense of entitlement that you have to deal with.
And entitlement, by the way, is something that we nurture. And I don't say that in the sense of like, hey, you should blame yourself. It's your fault. But this is how we come into the world. When we're children, we do things that are very self-centered, like, hey, there's a kid playing with the toy. I'm just going to go take it. Why not? I haven't really had anyone teach me about values yet. And you see kids do things like this all the time at early stages, and adults have to intervene. Hey, we don't do that. We don't do that. Even at our earliest stage, our number one way of getting what we want is we cry. And then one of the first things we learn as we start to mature as little children is how to get what we want in ways that go beyond crying. You learn how to use words, and you learn how to ask. You learn how to go beyond crying and hoping someone figures you out to saying, hey, I need water. I need alone time. I need help with this, right? And so maturity is about learning how to do those things that help us cooperate with others in a way that honors their boundaries and respects their individual rights, and that involves consideration of the well-being of everyone else involved. And that's something that has to be taught. So when people make it all the way to age 20, all the way to age 30, all the way to age 40, as surprising as it may be, it's often because people haven't called them out and they haven't really suffered consequences, and what they do actually works. People keep doing what works for them, even if it's wrong. And the earlier you can show people this isn't going to work with me, the better off they will be as a result of that. And, the funny thing about entitlement is I don't think maturity is really the result of not having any shoulds. I think maturity is the result of being so in tune with reality that you recognize that reality just doesn't care about your shoulds. So, hey, personally, I feel like I should just have money rain from the sky. I should have people just write me a really big check every time I say something to them that helps them solve a problem. Hey, I should have lots of things. I should be more successful than that guy over there. But you know what? No one cares but me about that. And even if I'm right in my shoulds, the fact of the matter is nothing's going to happen unless I take charge of my reality to do something about it. I should just be able to snap my fingers and have a glass of water in front of me. But as much as I feel that way, it's not going to happen unless I get up and go do it. So you don't have to argue with people about their shoulds. You don't have to tell people that they're entitled. You don't have to yell at people and go, oh, you just think life should be easy. Leave that alone. Just show them reality by not compromising what is right in order to accommodate their should, in order to accommodate their desire to have it easy.
What you're really describing here is you have a list of wants and you're treating them as though that's how the universe should bend toward your wants, toward your preferences, toward your desires. And when it doesn't work that way, then we feel entitled and we may lash out in some way. And like Marta's sister here, Marta's sister has become this commitment. You've committed to raising her. And so you feel like, oh, yeah, I've got a stake in this, right? But the thing I've learned in my own life is every unchecked commitment eventually becomes an obligation. And then, of course, every unchecked obligation eventually becomes a burden. Yeah. And that's where you are right now with your sister. This thing you've committed, you've devoted yourself to your sister. But along with that came some expectations. Maybe you accidentally picked up some expectations. This is how this person should love me. Now, of course, we don't want anyone that we care about to steal from us. We also don't want them to just, in the abstract, we don't want them to disrespect us or treat us unjustly or unfairly. But these things happen. And the more expectations we have around those, the more upset we are going to feel. And so when it comes to your sister, yeah, you are going to have to let go. Now, you get to decide what that letting go looks like. To love them from a distance, creating that distance, and maybe they have to earn your trust back. And so you have some contracted boundaries now because they ruined those old boundaries. You gave them your trust, you gave them way more freedom in the relationship, and they abused that. So you can have no boundaries at all. That's not going to work out really well for you, right? You can have too strict of boundaries, and that can harm you as well. Or you might just decide, you know what? I need a break from my sister. Maybe I'm not going to talk to her for the next year. I'm not going to give her access to me because that is the leverage that I actually have with my sister. Once you've cut her off of your other resources, time and attention is the only leverage that you really have.
The last thing I'll say is you know what's best for you in terms of what you need to do. But as a matter of principle, you do not have to cut her off completely. You do not have to say, I'm never going to speak with her again. It's important to remember.
Wait, real quick. You acknowledge that's an option, though.
As an option, not a necessity. And
yes.
I don't know enough details to know if it's a necessity. It may be the case that it's not an option for you, right? It's a conceivable possibility. It's on the table and worth considering. But there are cases where, look, it's just gone too far. And you need to cut that person off.
I think that what we're talking about here, though, at least you're stimulating this idea in my mind. sometimes we feel like we have to do something. She even said it like, I feel like I need to save her, to change her, right?
Yeah.
And so, of course, what happens? I'm going to find the 7 things I need to do. I'm going to find the self-help book or the blog post or the podcast that tells me the formula to do the necessary things. But it might be that any level of doing at this point is going to create more chaos. I talked to you a moment ago about my 4 friends. Yeah. The one who's going through the infidelity thing, he's handled it by sort of by doing less in that relationship, stepping back and realizing this isn't something that I can actually fix right now. I can't do 14 different things. In fact, that's going to make my life more chaotic. I know other people who, when something traumatic happens or something tragic happens, they often amplify the chaos with more chaos. I'm going to do more. I'm going to do better. I'm going to do different. And there is a time and place for doing things differently. But sometimes the best path forward is to pause and do nothing in that relationship.
Yeah, I just want to make one caveat about trust. And that is, trust is often contextual, and it is very rarely the case that we have absolute trust of any person. We trust people relative to the competence and reliability they've demonstrated in a particular area, right? So there are some people I absolutely trust them to always be 10 minutes early. That doesn't mean I trust them with everything else, right? There are some people where it's like never trust them to be on time, right? That doesn't mean you can't trust them at all with anything, right? So when it comes to this situation with your sister, right now, she simply has not earned the trust to have access to your credit cards. She has not earned the trust to have access to any of your financials. At the same time, that doesn't mean you're physically unsafe around her, at least not all by itself. So it's quite possible that if she calls you up and says, hey, can I get some advice on a decision that I'm making? And I know you think that's never going to happen, but it might happen. You can trust her enough to sit there and talk with her for about 15 minutes about her situation. If she wants to meet up for lunch or coffee, you can probably trust that you're safe to meet her up without being harmed in any kind of way. It's just important that when trust is broken in a particular area, we establish boundaries in that area to protect ourselves from those actions that this person has a reputation for taking, but to be open to those other areas where they have been reliable, they have been safe, they have been good, and to not discount that and to leave room for possibly interacting with them in those areas. There are still ways to be good to her without bailing her out of financial troubles.
Marta, I know there's probably a lot of emotional clutter that's going on here as well, because you have a lot of expectations that were not met. You also have your own standards that are different from your sister's standards. And what you're trying to navigate right now is this relationship. And what's it look like going forward? But also, what are my emotional ties to this relationship that might actually be preventing me from letting go of that old version and moving forward to a new, more prosperous version? And so I'd love to send you a copy of TK's ebook. In fact, it's free. You can download it on our website at theminimalists.com/emotional clutter. The book itself sort of walks you through a lot of these emotions that clutter our everyday life. And instead of simply ignoring the emotions or trying to get rid of all of the emotions, TK, what you've done here is you've set up this understanding of what these emotions mean in our everyday life. So, Marta, I think you'll enjoy that. If you want the audiobook version of that, we'd be happy to send it to you as well. Alabama, before we get back to our callers, can you tell me, what time is it?
You know what time it is. It's time for the lightning round, where we answer the Patreon community chat's question of the week.
Yes, indeed. Oh, yeah. Now, during the lightning round, we each have 60 seconds to answer your question with a short, shareable, minimal maxim. You can find this episode's maxims in the show notes over at theminimalists.com/podcast, and every minimal maxim ever over at minimalmaxims.com. We'll also deliver our weekly show notes directly to your inbox, including 5 new minimal maxims every Monday. In fact, I think it's like 10 minimal maxims this week. Every Monday for free if you sign up for our email newsletter at theminimalists.email. We'll never send you spam or junk or advertisements. Yuck. But we will start your week off with a simple dose of simplicity. Alabama, what's the question of the week this week?
In what ways do you make your own life more chaotic?
Oh, I'd love to hear what y'all have to say, listeners, but we reached out to our Patreon community via the community chats over there, and a bunch of people, dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of people answered this question. In what ways do you make your own life more chaotic? Now, before we get to TK's and my pithy responses, I thought we'd read a few of the patrons' chats.
Here's one from Noor. Right now, my life is chaotic because I'm staying in a situationship, even though I'm certain we have different end goals. But the prospect of being alone until I met someone new sounded more painful than allowing this to run its course.
Well, longtime listeners of the podcast know that I have one of my favorite maxims is I'd rather be alone than be miserable. And it's easier for me to say that as an introvert, but I could apply that to any extroverted friend of mine as well. One way that we can make our lives more chaotic is to get into relationships that sort of lack a compatibility in our own lives. TK, are you familiar with this term, pain shopping?
No.
It's fascinating because I think it relates to this episode really well, but quite often we go shopping for pain. We go looking for things that might hurt us.
Like I'll give you $100 to punch me in the face.
Yes, but metaphorically.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so pain shopping might be like, oh, you know what? I'm going to go look at my wife's phone. Who's she texting right now? I'm looking for something to be upset by. And sometimes it can be as simple as looking to misunderstand someone, or it can be us putting ourselves in relationships, or as Noor says here, in a situationship in which we are not compatible. And so it may not be a fruitful relationship, not because of the other person, but because I've gone out pain shopping. Now, why do we do that? I think we go pain shopping. We look for things to upset us because it gives us at least that bit of certainty. I'm certain I can find something to be upset about.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if it's not just a form of pain confirmation, right? Like you picking up the wife's phone, let me look at her text messages to see who she's been texting. You're already hurting, man.
Yes.
There's a thought process that led you up to that point, right? There are some stories you've been running in your head for some time before you get to that point, right? And so you're already kind of in pain and you're looking for something to validate that story of pain that you're telling. Yeah, that's interesting. I never heard that term, but that's fascinating.
I'd like to do a whole episode on pain shopping and the different ways we go to look to upset ourselves or to hurt ourselves emotionally. There's this tie-in with the emotional clutter piece of it as well, because you know what? Someone like Noir is like, hey, I'm terrified of walking away from this thing that doesn't work. In other contexts, it's often way easier to see. If you have a boss that is abusive, well, it's easier to say, you know what? Even though I'm getting paid here, I need to go find a different job. And it's true, you may need to stay at that job to pay the bills, but the difference with the relationship is, unless you're in a dependent sort of relationship where that other person is paying the bills, walking away is one of the first steps of reducing that level of misery. And staying in a situationship or relationship like that is often pain shopping. It's almost like a form of masochism. It's I'm looking for ways to harm myself. I'm heaping more chaos into my life. And often it's other people around us and our expectations really of those other people that make our lives more chaotic. You know, on the private podcast this week, I want to discuss with you, TK, the misnomer of relationship failure. Because I think a lot of failed relationships aren't actually failed relationships. So I want to talk about that. We'll also discuss the 3 ingredients of a successful relationship. Every successful relationship has 3 ingredients. I want to talk about that. But also AJ, Brian, and Cordelia had something to say.
I make my life more chaotic by being an introvert, but working a career that requires me to be an extreme extrovert.
This resonates with me because, TK, when I was in the corporate world, I realized that being good at a thing does not mean it's a good choice. I was really good at managing dozens and eventually hundreds of retail stores and running the operations. And I had a very extroverted career and I was good at it, but I didn't enjoy it because it didn't align with me as a human being. And I was staying in it because of the money, right? Oh yeah, and the money said something about me and the status that's related to that and the job title, right? Yeah. But when that stuff's in the driver's seat, especially when money is in the driver's seat, then I think a crash is inevitable.
Yeah, you're exactly right, man. And we make choices like that every day, right? This is who I am. This is what I need. This is what's best for me. But I simply can't afford to say yes to that.
What about a Lynn?
I make my life more chaotic by underestimating how much time certain things take, like my morning routine, traffic, etc. And then I feel rushed going to different commitments.
TK, does this resonate with you at all?
I literally looked at Josh this morning going, TK's running a little behind. Where is Tacoa?
It's funny, the thing you talked about trust earlier with respect to being on time, and you even raised your hand. This is an audio podcast. But like, no, I don't trust TK to be on time, but I'd give him my wallet. I'd give him the keys to my house or my car. I let him watch my daughter, no problem. He could spend the afternoon at the movies with my wife. I don't have any concerns about any of that. There's just this one area. And I don't know that it actually makes his life more chaotic. I don't know if you have any insights on that.
I think it makes your life more chaotic, Josh.
But that's also my expectation, right?
Yeah.
It's my expectations that make my life more chaotic. It's not TK who's making my life more chaotic.
That's fair.
It's my expectations I heap onto TK.
So I think I've mentioned this before, but my wife and I, the TV show we're watching right now is Columbo, old school Columbo episodes. And we're watching an episode the other night, and Columbo comes in the room all completely disheveled. And one of the cops that's there is talking about the murder, and he mentions how there's coffee spilled. And Columbo says, coffee? And he goes, yeah, the coffee was spilled right here. He goes, is there any more of it left? And they're like, yeah. He goes, man, I didn't get any sleep last night. Let me get a cup of that. And my wife says, oh my gosh, that's you. Like, this guy's going to get to the bottom of this crime. But outside of solving crimes, he has nothing going for himself. Doesn't get enough sleep, doesn't take care of himself, completely disheveled, can't remember anything, but he's going to solve this crime.
Thanks, honey.
Before we get to our pithy answers here at TK, I noticed there were a few other people that mentioned like procrastination.
Yes.
And then Amy and Nikki both said, my life is more chaotic because I'm always trying to do one more thing before leaving the house.
Amy, Nikki, this is the title of my memoir, is One More Thing Before I Go. I'm constantly late because of that specific thing.
And I think there's an argument that might be a form of procrastination in and of itself. Like, I know there's this other thing I need to do. This used to happen to me with writing all the time, where I wanted to write every day and I could schedule the time to write, but then, I got to fold the laundry still. You know what? I forgot to wash the dishes. Oh, can you believe I didn't put the clothes from the washer into the dryer? And then all of a sudden it was one more thing, and I was one more thinging myself to death. It was creating more chaos because it was getting in the way of the thing that I actually wanted to do.
You know how they say fear of success is a thing? I think fear of being too early is also a thing as well. I think sometimes people are late a lot because they're just afraid of being 30 minutes early. What the heck am I going to do if I'm there that early? I'd rather take my chances and be right on time or just a few minutes early than be there too early. And then you end up doing things like not accounting for the variables that make you late. Whenever you focus on just being on time, you're almost always late.
I think about Ryan Nicodemus with respect to this. His thing is he often just double and triple books. He'll say yes to everyone because he wants to please everyone. And this is,
Does he believe he'll make it work?
Yeah, and the thing is, he has a track record of being able to thrive in chaos. He's one of those people. I remember when we were back in the corporate world, and his sales would suck the first half of the month. Honestly, the first 25 days of the month, he would start to catch up toward day 20, 22, 25. But those last 5 days, he would then leapfrog everyone. And it got him a promotion, and the same thing would happen. His stores are down here at the bottom. And then somehow the last 5 days of the month come around, and he's the #1 store manager in the company, and he's getting praise, he's getting awards, he's getting trips. grips. And it almost like it took that chaos for him to thrive. And so when I say chaos, I don't say it is a bad thing. There are some people like Nicodemus who function really well in chaos. In fact, they need that almost as a motivator.
Would you encourage someone to keep that? Like, hey, it's working for you, man. Do it. Or would you say like, nah, you probably should look into that?
I think it works really well up into a point, right? On the private podcast for today, we're going to talk about people who don't plan enough. And then there are people who over plan, and that can be me. And I think either one of those can be a bit detrimental because with me, I can plan so much that I don't end up doing anything. And then Ryan can be in the middle of chaos so much he doesn't actually plan on doing the thing that he wants to do. And so there probably is a healthy level of chaos until it turns into that disorder that is causing all of the turmoil or discontent in our lives.
Wow.
Do you have something pithy for me to answer this question? By the way, the question of the week again is, in what ways do you make your own life more chaotic?
My pithy maxim is, or pithy, for all my people out there, when you resist, your power ceases to exist. I can probably win a court case with that one. But, problems are a part of life. But sometimes we attach this extra layer to our problems, like the fact that I am going through this just goes to show how much I suck at life. Or you get a flat tire, something happens that makes you late for work. This always happens to me. This only happens to me. Nothing ever works out for me. My birthdays always get ruined. Why am I the only one that ever meets this kind of person? No one ever, I would get this question. I would be the person to have a moment like this happen to me. And you're not very powerful in those moments. You're not very tuned in with your creative energy in those moments. But when you step back and you say, I have a problem. I don't like this problem. It feels terrible, but I can learn from this. I have a problem. I don't like it. I think I'm responsible for producing a lot of the elements of it, but that's okay. I can get better in the future and I can figure this out. There's some room for me to learn. This problem isn't the end or the definition of me. That's when you bring your power back into focus.
So when you resist, you're talking about almost hiding the problem. It doesn't go away, right? But you resist. Yeah, what you're saying here, when you resist, your power ceases to exist. It's almost as though like we can take a problem that is relatively small. Tony Robbins calls it killing Godzilla while he's a baby. Don't wait till he's taking over the city, right?
I like that, yeah.
But that's what happens quite often in our everyday lives. Like, oh, that's a small problem. I can get to it tomorrow. Before you know it, 6 months have gone by, years gone by, and now Godzilla is taking over the city. It's a real problem now. It's a death. It's a health crisis. It is a divorce. It is an infidelity. It's some sort of big chaos that had I looked at Godzilla when Godzilla was a baby, it would have been so much easier for me to address that problem then. Here's my pithy answer for you. A bigger shovel will not dig you out of the hole you've created. I think quite often what happens is, well, we have a problem and we say, I need to do something. I've dug myself into a hole, so I better dig faster. I better dig wider. I better dig harder. You know what? This digging isn't working. I must get a new shovel, a bigger shovel, a more precise shovel. If that doesn't work, I'm just going to get a forklift or I'm going to get some sort of tractor equipment. I'm going to just find a way to get out of this hole by digging, when the real answer is to stop digging. And so I found that when I'm in chaos, and this has happened to me, one of the best things I can do is just pause. It doesn't mean stop forever. It just means pause and say, are the actions I'm doing here representative of getting me out of this hole, or are they making the hole worse? And in our society, it feels like inaction is considered to be lazy. It's considered to be wrong. And so we say we can't do nothing. We have to do something to solve this chaos. And so we heap more chaos onto it. We go pain shopping. We beat ourselves up. And then before we know it, the hole is such a huge crater. And it started out as just a small little pothole. But we kept digging and digging and digging. And it got more chaotic by the day.
Man, You just described my philosophy of the public education system. Hey, we're digging in the same space, in the same way, with the same mindset. And hey, we're not finding what we need. Let's just throw more money at it, AKA get a bigger shovel and keep digging in the same space with the same people in the same way, looking for the same things. At some point, you got to change your spots or ask yourself, is digging the thing that I need to be doing right now?
How about you, listeners? In what ways do you make your own life more chaotic? We'd love to hear from you in the Patreon community chat. You can also leave a comment on YouTube. We're just getting started. We have a collection of callers to talk to. But first, real quick for right here, right now, here's two things going on in the life of the minimalist. Today is the first day of a brand new month. The new month is here, and it is the perfect time to declutter your life, your house, and maybe your office space, your car, with something we call the 30-day Minimalism Game. You can download the free calendar over at theminimalists.com/game. Longtime listeners know how this works. We've had tens of thousands of people play the 30-day Minimalism Game. You also saw it in our last Netflix film. You partner up with someone, a friend, a family member, a coworker, and you say, hey, we're both going to get rid of some stuff this month, but I don't know where to start. Well, that's easy. The first day, you just get rid of one item. Second day, 2 items. Third day, 3 items. So you start to get that momentum and you build that letting go muscle. It gets more difficult because by the middle of the month, it's day 15 and I have to get rid of 15 items today and 16 items tomorrow and 17 the next day. Now, whoever goes the longest wins. So you can bet something at the beginning of the month. Maybe it's a nice meal, concert tickets, whatever you want. Just a friendly little wager between friends. And whoever goes the longest wins. If you both make it to the end of the month, then you've both won because you've gotten rid of about 500 items. And that is a really good start. You can also post all of your photos of the things you're letting go of on social media. You can use our hashtag #LessIsNow. Also this week, FAMs. Did you know that you can have a Zoom call with the Minimalists? That's right. You can join the Minimalists on the first Friday of every month during our Friday afternoon Minimalist Zoom on Patreon. Our next FAMs is this Friday, July 5th at 3 p.m. Eastern. It's one of my favorite things that we do. We get to have this Zoom call with our listeners. You get to come up. You can be a fly on the wall, turn your camera off and just listen, or turn your camera on and join the party. You can hop up on screen with us and we'll talk to you. We'll answer questions. Any interaction that you want to have with the Minimalists, you can join me and Malabama, Nicodemus, TK, and the whole team. Post-production, Peter is usually there as well. Malabama, what else you got for us?
Here's a minimalist insight from one of our listeners.
Hello, the Minimalists. My name is Dr. Orlando Ramirez. I'm calling from Phoenix, Arizona, and many years ago I embraced minimalism and stoicism. At the time, it was very easy for me to let go of things in my life. While I fully embraced letting things go, I did choose to keep a few items to which I held a strong emotional attachment to. I had curated a set of items that I used to decorate my office and elements of my home with, and each of these items represented significant touch points in my life. Represented meaningful experiences with other people that I'd had over the years. But earlier this year, I began to think about my life in different ways. Turning 50 can do that to a person. So a few weeks ago, I held a dinner, and I invited my closest friends and their spouses to mark the occasion. During the dinner, I took time to thank everyone for attending. And then one by one, I took those items that remained in my office out of a box, and I told how I came to possess each item, and of the experiences and memories each one represented to me. And then as I finished the story of that item, I presented the item to a friend, and I told the story of my friendship with that individual and how they impacted my life and changed me for the better. Now, of course, being a minimalist, I explained that they would not hurt my feelings if they chose not to keep the item. But the next day, when I observed all of the new absence that was in my office, I could not help but think about each of the different items. My wife asked me if I felt a sense of regret in giving those remaining items away, and I told her no, that 100% I did not feel regret, that instead I felt solace. I felt solace in knowing that I connected with my friends in a way they did not expect, and I felt solace in letting go. And as I head into my 50s, I now feel lighter, even more lighter than I did before, even more simpler than I did before. And, of course, I definitely feel content. Thank you so much for all that you do. Cheers.
Orlando, wow, thank you so much for that thought-provoking and insightful comment. For anyone else who has a listener tip or insight about this episode or any other episode, leave a comment on Patreon or YouTube, or better yet, you can send a voice memo to podcast@theminimalists.com so we can feature your voice on the show. All right, that's the first 28.6% of episode 449. We'll see you on Patreon for the full Maximal edition, which includes answers to a bunch more questions. Questions like, should I end my chaotic marriage, or should I try to save it? How can I save my mother from my chaotic and narcissistic father? Why has my girlfriend changed after our pregnancy scare? Plus, a million more questions and simple living segments over on the Minimalists private podcast. We also have an outstanding home tour from one of our listeners this week on Patreon. Just visit patreon.com/theminimalists or click the link down in the description to subscribe and get your personal link so that our weekly Maximal episodes play in your favorite podcast app. You'll also gain access to all of our podcast archives all the way back to episode 001. By the way, Patreon is now offering free trials, so if you'd like to test drive our private podcast, you can join for 7 days for free. And that is our minimal episode for today. If you leave here with just one message, let it be this: love people and use things. Because the opposite is chaotic. Thanks for listening, y'all.
We'll see you next time.
Peace.
Every little thing you think that you need, every little thing you think that you need, every little thing that's just feeding your greed. Oh, I bet that you'd be fine without it.